Why should we read the Republic? I met lots of students ask this question to themselves when they're given it as a set of books at the beginning of their university course. But in fact, there are many good reasons to read the Republic. And the first one I would pick on is just that it is immensely readable. It's not Plato did not write philosophy like a dry textbook. He wrote it like a living conversation. The whole of the Republic, which is a fairly fat book, is a living conversation written in short, almost soundbite type answers, but nevertheless, developing some very, very important ideas. So, my first answer then: we should read the Republic just because it is readable. It is readable, it was written by a genius, and it's worth reading. It's easy to read. It's not difficult. But then there's also obviously the thoughts, the content of the book, and he's asking this absolutely fundamental question: why should we bother to be good? What's in it for us effectively?
I'm 43 years old and I owe tens of thousands of dollars in student loans. Oh sure, I knew the loans were piling up as I went through school. But with one loan coming from here, another from there, I had no idea of the rockslide that was building. 15 years later, I still experience moments of sheer horror regarding my family's financial situation. My monthly student loan payment is more than triple my car payment. Okay, so without my college degree, I would not have been able to get my current job. For that, I'm grateful, but at what cost? My loans have been accruing at a rate of 10%, and now they have burgeoned to, well, I am English major, you do the math. I don't think they'll ever get paid off. We're in debt way past our eyeballs, and there's no hope in sight. I'm being kept in class, a financial class of graduates whose only hope for attending college meant borrowing money from the government.
Because of our mounting credit card debt and monthly payments that far exceed our family's incomes, and my kids will also join the class of citizens who can't rely on their parents for college support. Do I wish I'd chosen another educational route? You bet. Perhaps trade school. I've thought that being a plumber might not be such a bad gig. But if your job aspirations require a 4-year degree, take my advice and choose a college you can afford, both during and after graduation. Take a realistic look at your anticipated income, and factor in priorities that don't carry a price, like the spouse and children you might want to have someday. I was overconfident that my student loan debt would pale in comparison to the lucrative writing career I'd enjoy after graduation. Now I'm paying for that decision in more ways than I'd ever imagined.
Under appropriate conditions, why you sound receptors. You've got sound receptors in your ear. And they are beautiful. We're not going to talk about them in any length, but there's a little flappy, these little spiky things coming along in your ear, and they can translate vibrational energy coming from your eardrum being translated into a vibration in the fluid in your ear, into a physical motion of these little receptors there, into an electrical motion, into the electrical signal that goes into your ear. So all of that. Oh, that's pretty impressive stuff. We're not going to talk about the details of it, but I invite some of you want to learn more about this particular MIT students, I think, find receptors to be really quite remarkable kinds of devices.
I have been writing non-fiction for years, and secretly wanting to be a novelist. When I first started writing at the age of 30, it was with the intention of writing fiction, but I took a little detour for 10 or 12 years, and write non-fiction, which I absolutely have no regret about at all. I think it's exactly the right thing for me to do. But there's this dream tucked away inside of me to do this. Now I was remembering reading something that wrote, who is a great novelist from Mississippi, who had a big influence on me actually. She said, "No art ever came out of not risking your neck." And I think she's absolutely right. It felt that way to me at the time. It actually feels that way every time I sit down to write something.
Sea creatures are inspiring the latest devices that harness wave power. This one, called the Oyster, sits on the seafloor and opens and closes as waves pass over it. Cables attach it to generators on the shore. Since the November 2009, it's been powering 9,000 homes in the Orkney Islands. Another device looks like a snake. The Anaconda is made from a rubber tube filled with water that floats just below the surface. When the swell hits the front of it, the tube squeezed above ripples down its links and powers a turbine in its tail. Prototypes are currently being tested, but the full-scale version will be 200 meters long. This system also looks like a snake. But this one is made of steel. It floats near the surface, where waves make its joints move. This drives hydraulic systems that power electrical generators, like the Anaconda.
This is Hans Krebs, who in 1937 published a paper showing the sequence of chemical reactions by which energy is released in individual cells. It is called the Krebs cycle, which some of you may remember from your chemistry course in your high school. Krebs is a wonderful example, to me, of how a scientist who is determined can overcome all kinds of human obstacles. Krebs's father constantly discouraged him and told him that he had just mediocre intelligence and would never do anything important in his life, as a teenager. What Krebs remembers in his memoir, his father said to him, "You can't make a silk purse at a sow's ear." Not the same quote, but that he had only mediocre ability and would never be a great scientist. Language death is not mainstream theater. It is not mainstream anything. Can you imagine Hollywood taking it on? It is so far outside the mindsets of most people that they have difficulty appreciating what the crisis is all about, because they are not used to thinking more about language as an issue in itself. Somehow we need to change these mindsets. We need to get people thinking about language more explicitly, more intimately, more enthusiastically. Interest in language is certainly there. In the general population, most people are fascinated by such topics as where words come from, or what the origin of their town's name is, or whether their baby's name means anything. They are certainly prepared to play Scrabble and a host of other language games ad infinitum, and language games are often found on radio and television, too, but a willingness to focus that interest on general issues.
Normally, however, spectacles are part of an assemblage of items, giving us an overall look. In fashion terms, they are classed as accessories along with shoes, jewelry, handbags, or watches. But in healthcare terms, they are of course a medical device. And in many languages other than English, they are often described as a prosthesis, an artificial part of the body, part of you, making you who you are. Choosing your spectacles is therefore a major decision. Increasingly, people own 2 or more pairs for different occasions or times of the day. There is a phrase for this in the industry. It's called lifestyle dispensing, and it dates back to the 1950s. The idea is that you wear one type of spectacles in the workplace and quite another at leisure or on the beach.
Today I want to talk about water and the law that surrounds drinking water, to talk about its quality, talk about what your rights are to clean water, to also give you a sense of what key threats are to drinking water, what your exposure might be, and what we might to do about it, both legally but also personally. Water is a critical component of our environment and our bodies. Your body is close to 70% water. You can go for several weeks, 2 or 3 on average without food. You can only go for about 4 minutes without air. And you can go for maybe 4 or 5 days without water before you die. So water is absolutely critical. And one of the key arguments I want to make today is that it's a largely neglected area of environmental law given the rapid increase in our knowledge about chemical threats to water quality and where those threats come from.
Students at the University of Leicester have recently whizzed up a storm of eco-friendly smoothies. This comes as part of a week of events aimed at promoting environmental initiatives on campus. A range of events and activities were organized by the University Environment Team and the Students' Union to encourage students to waste less, recycle more, travel sustainably, and save energy to contribute to the university's target of cutting its carbon footprint by 60% by the year 2020. The highlight of the week was a cycle-powered smoothie maker. Students rescued fruit from Leicester Market which would otherwise have been thrown away and salvaged it to create delicious smoothies. No electricity was used as the fruit was whizzed up in a blender attached to the back of a bike pedaled by enthusiastic student volunteers.
The practice of giving storms personal names appears to have originated with Clement Wragg, an Australian meteorologist who in the 1890s entertained himself by naming storms after women, mythical figures, and politicians that he didn't like. The modern system of using personal names developed during World War II, when meteorologists began using women's names, often those of wives or girlfriends, instead of cumbersome designations based on latitude and longitude. Short and quickly understood, names were easier to transmit over the radio and easier to keep straight if there was more than one storm in a given area. The system was formalized in 1953 when the National Weather Service put together an alphabetical list of female names to be used for storms in the Atlantic Basin.
In reality, however, the causes of truancy and non-attendance are diverse and multifaceted. There are as many triggers of non-attendance as there are non-attenders. Each child has her own unique story, and whilst there may often be certain identifiable factors in common, each non-attending child demands and deserves an individual response, tailored to meet her individual needs. This applies equally to the 14-year-old who fails to attend school because a parent is terminally ill, the overweight 11-year-old who fails to attend because he is embarrassed about changing for PE in front of peers, the 15-year-old who is bored by lessons, and to the 7-year-old who is teased in the playground because she doesn't wear the latest designer label clothes.
A team in the University of London found that people who went with their initial response on a test of visual perception, questions included picking out an anomaly and a pattern of symbols, did better than those who were given more time to ponder. Whereas the subconscious brain recognized a rotated version of the same symbol as different, the conscious brain reasoned that an apple is still an apple whether rotated or not, the researchers on the project concluded. When the subjects had time to engage their higher-level functions instead of relying on their intuitive responses, they were more likely to be wrong.
Imagine a time in the not-too-distant future when your power comes from a seamless mix of renewable energy and traditional sources. It is delivered by a grid that manages thousands of windmills and hundreds of thousands of customers. Computer-controlled, the grid is able to manage instant variations in supply and demand and provides a real-time power balance. Far more complex than anything in existence today, it is called a smart grid. This technology is a new frontier in power supply and seen as a green solution to current outdated management systems. When introduced, smart grids will result in energy savings and will allow consumers a choice in their electricity charges and to be able to select the cheapest time slots. Once an organization has its product to sell, it must then determine the appropriate price to sell it at. The price is set by balancing many factors including supply and demand, cost, desired profit, competition, perceived value, and market behavior. Ultimately, the final price is determined by what the market is willing to exchange for the product. Pricing theory can be quite complex because so many factors influence what the purchaser decides is a fair value. It also should be noted that, in addition to monetary exchange, price can be the exchange of goods or services as in a barter agreement, or an exchange of specific behavior, such as a vote in a political campaign. The difficulty for the energy industry is that smart grids do not exist in reality and the power companies cannot experiment with existing supplies.
Umami was first identified in Japan, in 1908, when Dr. Kikanai Ikeda concluded that kombu, a type of edible seaweed, had a different taste than most foods. He conducted experiments that found that the high concentration of glutamate in kombu was what made it so tasty. From there, he crystallized monosodium glutamate, MSG, the seasoning that would become popular the world over. Decades later, umami became scientifically defined as one of the 5 individual tastes sensed by receptors on the tongue. Then in 1996, a team of University of Miami researchers studying taste perception made another breakthrough. For an authentic approach, researchers built various types of equipment failures into the grid to test the system. And it works.
They discovered separate taste receptor cells in the tongue for detecting umami. Before then, the concept was uncharted. Up until our research, the predominant wisdom in the scientific community was that umami was not a separate sense. It was just a combination of the other 4 qualities such as salty, sweet, bitter, sour, explained Dr. Stephen Roper, the University of Miami physiology and biophysics professor who helped zero in on the taste along with Nirupa Chowdhury, the team's lead researcher. Without an actual grid to conduct research on, Professor Wu has had to design a simulated laboratory including input from theoretical wind generators and solar panels to feed into a constantly operating system.
One of the big challenges now is whether the technology can be scaled up to really make a difference, and will the developers be able to use it to get electricity out as well as heat? The efficiency falls dramatically when the sand is used to just return power to the electricity grid. In many areas of expertise, ranging from music, dance, art, and literature to sports, chess, mathematics, science, and foreign language acquisition, there is abundant evidence that young people differ from one another in their attainments and in the apparent ease with which they achieve them. Even within a family there may be marked differences. For example, a child who struggles at a musical instrument without much success may be overtaken by a younger sibling. It is widely believed that the likelihood of becoming one, exceptionally competent in certain fields depends on the presence or absence of inborn attributes variously labeled talents or gifts or, less often, natural aptitudes. According to an informal British survey, more than 3/4 of music educators who decide which young people are to receive instruction believe that children cannot do well unless they have special innate gifts. Davis 1994. The judgment that someone is talented is believed to help explain, as distinct from merely describing, that person's success. It is also widely assumed that the innate talent that makes it possible for an individual to excel can be detected in early childhood.
In a sustainable world that is achievable in the near future, water and related resources are managed in support of human well-being and ecosystem integrity in a robust economy. Sufficient and safe water is made available to meet every person's basic needs, with healthy lifestyles and behaviors easily upheld through reliable and affordable water supply and sanitation services, in turn supported by equitably extended and efficiently managed infrastructure. Water resources management, infrastructure and service delivery are sustainably financed.
There are so many reasons why, from fast food marketing to agriculture subsidies, but one contributing factor is the slow death of cooking, and the rise of the restaurant meal. Americans now spend more on food at restaurants than they do at grocery stores, but restaurant food tends to have even less fiber than the food we would otherwise eat at home. One problem seems to be that restaurant meals aren't typically loaded with two of the best sources of fiber, unprocessed fruits and vegetables. A revealing study from 2007, in which researchers interviewed 41 restaurant executives, showed that restaurants think fruits and vegetables are too expensive to feature prominently on the menu, and 61% said profits drive menu selections.
A massive tow truck worked Saturday to remove the remains of a burned-out oil tanker that exploded in a giant fireball overnight near the capital of Sierra Leone. Reuters' David Doyle has more. Deputy Health Minister Amara Jambai said the death toll currently stands at 99, with more than 100 people being treated in hospitals and clinics across the capital, Freetown. In a video from the scene shared online, the head of the National Disaster Management Agency, Brima Biosizi, said, "We've got so many casualties, burnt corpses," adding, "It's a terrible, terrible accident." Freetown's mayor said the extent of the damage from Friday's explosion was not yet known, adding that police and her deputy were at the scene to assist disaster management officials.
UNICEF is warning that schools in Haiti are increasingly at the mercy of gangs, with children becoming targets of robbery or ransom. The agency said Tuesday at least 7 schools in the capital of Port-au-Prince have been forced to pay unidentified gangs in exchange for security in the past 2 months, and that additional institutions have also been threatened. The warning comes days after authorities said gang members killed a university professor they had recently abducted. In addition, U.S. and Haitian authorities are still trying to secure the release of 17 missionaries from a U.S. religious organization who were kidnapped on October 16 near the capital.
Catherine Muse does not meet bohemian, hippie parents in her line of work. Typically one or both of the parents she sees work in the City of London. Professionals seek professionals, she says. Originally a nanny, Muse is now a parenting consultant, advising couples privately on changing their child's behavior, as well as doing corporate seminars for working parents. Her clients find they are unprepared for the chaos and unpredictability that having a child can entail. Parents are getting older, they have been in control their whole lives and been successful. Suddenly a baby turns up and life turns on its head. Nicknamed the 3-day nanny, of her pledge to fix behavioral problems in children under the age of 12 within 3 days, she is filming a new Channel 4 television series demonstrating her techniques. The role of the parenting consultant, distinct from that of a nanny, has developed, she says, as people are used to buying in expertise, such as personal trainers or, in her case, parenting advice.
Spanish is spoken by more than 300 million people in over 20 countries and is rapidly becoming one of the most popular choices for language learners around the world. A popular course for beginners, Sueños World Spanish is designed to meet the varied needs of adult learners, whether learning at home or in a class. From the very beginning, it encourages you to develop your listening and speaking skills with confidence and provides many opportunities to practice reading in Spanish. Using the extensive range of media available, from the course book to the audio CDs or cassettes, to the popular accompanying television series and free online activities, Sueños World Spanish can help you reach the equivalent level of a first qualification, such as GCSE. The presentation will cover copyright's position as one of the intellectual property rights and how it differs from other intellectual property rights. It will give an overview of what copyright protects as well as what may be done with copyright-protected works without permission under permitted acts. It is by manipulating the restricted acts through licensing arrangements that rights owners establish and exploit commercial markets. In contrast to commercial markets, the growth of open source and open content licensing models has challenged established business models. The presentation gives a brief commentary on two of the more prominent open licensing frameworks, the GNU Creative Commons licenses.
The speed of sound, otherwise known as Mach 1, varies with temperature. At sea level on a standard day, the temperature is 59 degrees Fahrenheit, and Mach 1 is approximately 761 mph. As the altitude increases, the temperature and speed of sound both decrease until about 36,000 feet, after which the temperature remains steady until about 60,000 feet. Within that 36,000 to 60,000 foot range, Mach 1 is about 661 miles per hour. Because of the variation, it is possible for an airplane flying supersonic at high altitude to be slower than a subsonic flight at sea level. The transonic band, the sound barrier, extends from around Mach 0.8, when the first supersonic shock waves form on the wing, to Mach 1.2, when the entire wing has gone supersonic. Individual human beings are relatively powerless creatures, no match for lions or bears. It's what they can do as groups that has enabled them to take over the planet. These groupings, corporations, religions, states are now part of a vast network of interconnected information flows. Finding points of resistance, where smaller units can stand up to the waves of information washing around the globe, is becoming harder all the time.
Used in a variety of courses in various disciplines, asking the right questions helps students bridge the gap between simply memorizing or blindly accepting information, and the greater challenge of critical analysis and synthesis. Specifically, this concise text teaches students to think critically by exploring the components of arguments, issues, conclusions, reasons, evidence, assumptions, language, and on how to spot fallacies and manipulations and obstacles to critical thinking in both written and visual communication. It teaches them to respond to alternative points of view and develop a solid foundation for making personal choices about what to accept and what to reject.